Good morning, everyone. If everyone could please grab a seat, we're going to get started. Well, good morning again, and thank you for being so prompt and on time. My name is Andrea Kelton Harris, and I'm one of the HR consultants in FAS Human Resources, and I'm also part of the diversity team here in the FAS. And we're so pleased to welcome you to this, our second dialogue for the 2017-2018 series. Our theme for this year is storytelling as a way to enhance inclusion. And today we're going to hear about one man's story and his narratives regarding race. Now, race is a small and yet powerful word. How many of you can think of an issue today that would involve race? Yeah, a lot of things. From DACA to Charlottesville to how we admit students into higher education. Race is a factor. And we think it's safe to say it's a very complex issue because you see, race can galvanize, race can be used to bring people together with similarities, to support and affirm each other, but race can also polarize. It can be used to separate people. And so we want to make sure that we are sharing information with you that we think will be useful to you as you work here at Harvard, and as you manage here at Harvard, and as you live your lives, because race is something that doesn't go away and come back when you come into the doors here at Harvard. Today you're going to hear about, as I said, one man's journey and his narratives regarding race. And we hope that that will give you a resource that you can go back to, consider a different perspective as you manage and handle matters of race here at Harvard. So we're privileged today to have with us Anthony Peterson. And as I said, he's going to share his narrative. And also Ms. Callie Crossley. As someone familiar to our diversity dialogues, she's agreed to lead a discussion with Anthony after his presentation. And there will be time for questions and answers from you to both of them. Now, Callie Crossley is a public speaker and television and radio commentator for national and local programs, including CNN's Reliable Sources, the PBS NewsHour, and PRI's The Takeaway. She also appears on weekly WGBH TV's Beat the Press, examining local and national media coverage, Basic Black, focusing on current events concerning communities of color, and Fox 25's Boston Morning Show. Anthony is an adjunct instructor and EDD candidate in leadership and professional studies at Trevecca Nazarene University. He developed and facilitated diversity training for corporate and church leaders for 2 decades. His degrees in psychology and religious education adds to his perspective. Tony's diversity discussions took a personal turn in 2014 when he began documenting conversations with his white grandchildren about race. He will offer glimpses of those conversations as an invitation to tell our own stories. Tony is a contributor to Rhetoric, Race and Religion, and he blogs inconsistently at T-Dads, Per, and Raw. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Anthony Peterson.
Damon was 5 years old when he asked his Aunt Kimberly the question, "Lily, am I black or am I white?" She answered a little bit simplistically. She said, "Well, your daddy's white and your mommy's white, so you're white." Well, for Damon, that wasn't exactly a satisfactory answer because his response was, "When I grow up, I'm going to be black." Now, Damon wasn't confused about his basic colors, but so why would a 5-year-old ask such a strange question? He already knew that it mattered, and at 5 years old, he had already attached value to race. And he wanted answers to questions that we don't want to answer, but we have to start answering race questions, and we have to start answering with the truth. We tell children that race is real, but that race doesn't matter, when the opposite is actually true. Race is not real, but race does matter. If that sounds crazy, let's look at the evidence. I was in 6th grade, living in Hawaii, when I decided I was going to be an anthropologist. I wanted to study human cultures. So to support my decision, my parents got me the book, The Color of Man by Robert Cohen. And I learned from that book that the color of our skin is determined by the amount of pigment in our skin, especially the pigment melanin. So darker skinned people have a lot of melanin, and lighter skinned people have less melanin. But I also learned that while anthropologists are very clear about those different skin colors, they've long abandoned the idea of races associated with skin color. There is no culture in color. There are no muscular or mental abilities associated with melanin. There are no character traits, no virtues, no vices, no values associated with skin color. And yet, from a very early age, we start teaching children that skin color is different from all other kinds of color, and we don't tell them why. So when Elliot was four years old, he's almost 8 now. When Elliot was 4 years old, he was obsessed with the human body. And it's not that sort of normal 4-year-old obsession with body parts. So here's an example. He started lecturing me one day. It's a lecture I'd heard before, but he was telling me about the human body. He was telling me about the respiratory system, the part the lungs and the diaphragm play, and he told me about the respiratory. I used to know this exactly. The digestive system, the part that the esophagus and the large and small intestines and the stomach play, and he taught me that the brain is the control center for the entire body. If you were here, he'd be lecturing you too, and he might even draw a picture. Oh, there's Elliot and his love of the human body, and there's the picture. So I was getting a little bored with the lecture because I'd had it before, and I stopped him and I said, "Elliot, what color is my skin?" And without even looking at me, he said, "It's black." And then I said, "What color is your skin?" There was a long pause. And then he said, "Gray?" If we pay attention, we can catch our kids in mid-indoctrination. Elliot had learned what to call the color of my skin, but he had not yet been schooled in what to call the color of his own skin. And he had not been told why we call this brown black and we call that pinkish color white. Of course, our notions of race go beyond skin color to other kinds of physical traits and abilities. I learned the word anthropology from my 6th grade teacher, Mr. Waite. My best friend Ted and I used to stay after school in 6th grade and pick Mr. Waite's brain. And one of those days, he told us about a U.S. senator who believed that black people were not very intelligent, but that they could run fast and jump high. Now, that U.S. senator, of course, was not the first prominent American to believe those sorts of things. According to historian Winthrop Jordan, who wrote White Man's Burden, which you can get out there, Thomas Jefferson, our 3rd U.S. president, struggled with the differences between the races. And so that man who wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal," didn't quite believe that. He continually wondered whether the black man, as he put it, was truly made of the same stuff with the same abilities as the white man and the people he called Indians. Jefferson actually wanted to believe that we were equal, but he never came to that conclusion. As Ted and Mr. Wade and I talked about these situations and looked around our own multicultural classroom, we had to laugh because the intellectual stereotypes did not fit the people in our classroom, and the athletic stereotypes fared even worse. Many of us also believe that race is somehow connected to what we call bloodlines, and we say we can trace our races back to 3 or 5 pure bloodlines. But again, the science doesn't back that up. There are no pure races, and there never have been. I apologize for giving you all old news. This is old news. It's not the domain of just the elite experts. It's been knowable for a long time, but most of us don't know it because in our lives we follow a stubbornly ingrained false narrative. So, if race is not real, why talk about it? We have a bunch of reasons not to talk about it. We believe that any mention of race means there's going to be winners and losers, heroes and villains, angels and demons. We believe somebody's going to get called a racist. And we might believe somebody should be called a racist. We don't agree on what racism is. We don't even agree on what race is. We believe that race is the domain of some people, but not of other people. And we believe that any mention of race exaggerates our differences, minimizes our similarities, and exacerbates our problems. But we must talk about it anyway. In her TED Talk, Colorblind or Color Brave, Melody Hobson lays out the case for diversity in all walks of life, but especially in businesses and boardrooms. And she also says that we need to pursue this diversity for the sake of the children. So recent studies have told us a little bit of where children get their racial ideas. In 2014, Allie Michael and Eleonora Bartoli described what they found in a study of white parents and their white adolescent children. They interviewed the parents and the children both together and separately. And they found the parents reported teaching their children, do not be racist, do not talk about race, do not say the word black, and do not notice racial differences. They wanted to teach their children that everyone is the same and that racism is bad. And they defined racism as overt, violent, and for the most part, obsolete. But the messages the children reported were incomplete and conflicting. The children reported learning the messages, everyone is the same, race is superfluous, and hard work alone is the key to success. They also reported some views of certain racial groups, including the belief black people are lazy, black people are poor, black neighborhoods are dangerous, and black people are physically stronger than white people. Sounds a little like the sentiments from that US senator years ago. I don't suspect that this type of socialization is exclusive to white families. The racial mixed messages we send children transcend our family dynamics or our family histories. Our family was gathered in Columbus, Ohio in the year 2000 for my dad's burial. After the service, we drove to my cousin's house for a meal. And I was driving the van that my white wife, Laura, had driven up from Nashville to shuttle us all around. And so in the van, I was driving the van, my wife was in the passenger seat, and in the back were my mother, my siblings, my uncles, all African American. And we pulled up to my cousin's apartment, and there was a car in front of us, and there was an older white couple getting out of the car, and they were having trouble getting out of the car. And we're all getting impatient because we want to park and get to our place. And so we're sitting there, and one of my relatives, who I won't identify, said out loud, "Do you see these people? They see us. They know we're here. They're being slow on purpose." He said, "White people always do this." And all the chatter in the van kind of cut out. And then this anonymous relative spoke up, and he said, "Oh, Laura, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that." Now, as a family, we laugh about that now. Mainly, we laugh about it because we know that he didn't really mean that. We know this relative, and that isn't even, that's not his world. But sometimes we have these racial conversations for a number of different reasons. Too often, when it comes to ethnicity, to color, to race, we have those conversations, but we don't have them in polite company and we don't have them in mixed company. They come up when something happens in our national culture, as Andrea mentioned. O.J. Simpson, 9/11, President Barack Obama, Ferguson, travel bans, Sandra Bland, Charleston, Philando Castile, Charlottesville, border wall, DACA. These things happen in our culture, and we hear pundits and politicians, media folks speaking about these things, and we cultivate our own ideas, and we might share those ideas with people around us who we think, we hope, are like-minded with us. But we also hear views from people who might be close to us, who are expressing something that we've never heard before and never knew that they held. And we realize that race does matter. These incidents happen, and our children who are taught to be colorblind, okay, that slide's not there, are blindsided. And there are opportunities, and there are incidents in our personal lives. It was the night in 2014 when Casey was born. Her siblings, then 10-year-old Damon, and 6-year-old Chelsea, and 3-year-old Zoe were staying the night with me while their parents and their grandmother went to the hospital for the baby. The next morning, I got up and viewed pictures on my tablet of the baby. And Chelsea, 6 years old, woke up and she looked at the pictures, but then she wanted that tablet to look up pictures of the Disney animated movie Frozen. And she wanted to look up pictures of Elsa, her favorite character. So she's looking through these pictures, and then she stops. And she sees this one picture, and she says, "What? That's not Elsa." This Elsa had dark brown skin. She said, "It's black. It's ugly." She's sitting right there, almost in my lap. What would you say? What would you do? I sat there frozen. And I thought, I could let it go, let it go. I can say, don't say that about black people. But I love our Chelsea, and I wanted to know more. So I said, you think black skin is ugly? And still a little shooken, she said, yes, And then, just in a split second, she said, well, not your skin, but Elsa is not supposed to be black. And I could only agree with her. Now, to be clear, this particular Elsa was not well drawn. But what sounded like a racist sentiment from Chelsea, white skin is beautiful, black skin is ugly, was nothing of the sort. What was actually going on is I had to venture into that discomfort to probe a little more. And what I found is what she really meant was, I've seen this movie dozens of times, and Elsa has white skin and a long side braid, unless it's Coronation Elsa, and then the braid is up. That's how I know it's Elsa. What Chelsea taught in that moment is that our ethnicity is essential to our identity, even if you're an animated character. What followed was a loving and truthful racial conversation with 6-year-old Chelsea, 10-year-old Damon, and 3-year-old Zoe. 3 white children and their black grandfather. And there have been other opportunities. One of my favorite things to do around the holidays is to read aloud Christmas stories. And this year, we gathered Chelsea, who's now 10, Elliot, who's 7, Zoe is 6, Autumn, who's 5, and Casey, who is 3. And I was reading the story Maggie's Gift by Catherine Peterson. And in that story, it features Mr. McGee, a lonely and cranky older widower. He agrees to take an 8-year-old girl and her 5-year-old brother home on Christmas Eve because they can't stay in the children's home that night. As he's on the phone discussing the arrangements with Miss Trainer from the children's home, he asks, by the way, what color are the children? White, she says. Does it matter? Yes, he says. I have to know what color to get the doll. Now, I had read this story aloud many times, but this time I had to pause right there. And one reason is I had in the back of my mind the book Raising White Kids, which just came out last month, by Dr. Jennifer Harvey. And Dr. Harvey encourages parents of white children to take advantage of these moments to promote what she calls race consciousness. For her, race-conscious parenting involved noticing and naming race early and often. So I paused the story to explain to my white grandchildren, when this story was written, many people believed that white children should only have white baby dolls, and black or brown children should only have black or brown baby dolls. And I was a little amused that I had to explain to them the difference between now and then. But Chelsea picked up the narrative. She said, yeah, in those days, black people and white people couldn't be together. If you were a white person and you wanted to marry a black person, you couldn't do it. And then she went through all these other forbidden marriage scenarios, racial marriage scenarios that she could think of. And then she said, but Martin Luther King came and he changed all that. And Elliot shouted, oh, I know him. And then Chelsea continued. Martin Luther King said, you can marry whoever you want. The color doesn't matter. It's like chocolate ice cream and vanilla ice cream. And you mix it all up and it's caramel. This was not the time to demonstrate how bad that analogy really was. But her loving and lovely sentiment came through. Zoe chimed in, my baby doll is brown. I know, I said, and I remember what you named her. I know because the day she brought the baby doll home from Dollar General, she introduced us. She said, "Peepaw, this is my baby, and she's like you. I named her Moana. I'll call her my baby, but you call her Moana. Again, she's like you. I was gonna get the white one, but it was too much." I pushed just a little bit. "Was the white one the same kind of doll?" "Yeah," she said, "but this one was almost free. The white one was $10. Once again, I chose not to engage our first grader in the discussion of why the brown doll was almost free, because our race-conscious conversations don't have to occur all at once. We can circle back around and have that conversation later. And if we're paying attention, there'll be plenty other opportunities. When we talk openly with children about race, we don't burden them, we free them. We allow them to embrace an essential part of their own identity and also to embrace the identities of all other people they encounter. We handicap our children when we operate in racial silence, and we rob them of an essential part of their own identity. And I suspect that this is especially the case for white or gray people, children like Damon, Chelsea, Elliot, Zoe, Autumn, and Casey. The vision I long for is not post-racial, and where we ignore racial differences. What I long for, and I suspect you long for, is not post-racial, but post-racist society. A society where the destruction wrought by race and power is eliminated. Racism and its inequality still stubbornly exist. But those inequalities are only a symptom of something deeper in our national psyche. There remains the reality that race matters, and not always in positive ways. I believe that the road to a post-racist society, a society where our diversity is a virtue, must be paved on a commitment to embrace race. So how do we proceed? One way is to begin by taking our cues from the children. We start by answering truthfully. We stop telling them that race is not real, but then showing them that it is. We break our silence when children ask why some brown people are called brown and other brown people are called red or yellow or black or white. And if we really want to benefit from our diversity and demolish the strongholds of racism, we dare to tell the truth even before children ask. Tell them race is not real, but that race does matter, and tell them why. Damon, Chelsea, Zoe, and Casey's older brother is Christian. And when Christian was 11, when Damon was 5, Damon posed another question. We were sitting in a fast food restaurant, and Christian had already learned the rules of racial silence. So we're sitting there, and the two boys are sitting at a table separate from the adults and the babies. And just out of the blue, Damon walked over to my table and touched my skin, turned back to his brother and said, "I just want to know, what color is this?" Now we could see the reticence on Christian's face. He did not want to answer this question. He had already learned those rules. And so I tried to break the tension for him, and I said, "Just answer the question." And Christian said, "It's brown." And Damon walked smugly back to his seat. That's all I wanted to know. He just wanted the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. We're going to have, We're going to have a discussion that is facilitated by Callie Crossley. And when we get to the question and answer portion, if you could please raise your hand so that we can get you a mic, because this is being live streamed so they can hear it. So we'll turn it over to Callie and Anthony.
Okay. So thank you for your interesting conversation and sharing of your story, since this is storytelling. I'm struck by so many things, so I'm going to start with what sounds like a really obvious question, so I know it's obvious if people are thinking, why'd she ask that obvious question? When you put this together and prepared to present it for the first time, who did you envision in the chairs? Who was your intended audience?
You know, it's interesting you asked that. I didn't know it consciously, but I think subconsciously I imagined white folks who aren't comfortable talking about race. I think that was in the back of my mind, because people of color, and my wife's going to see this, she hates that expression because she says, I'm white, but I am a color. But people of color talk about these things because we have to. And some white folks do, and some white folks don't. And so I was imagining making it easier for those white folks who are reticent to talk about race to have those conversations.
So that's what I thought, because if you were to search through the files of TED Talks, there's like a gazillion talks on race. But you would be likely to stop on yours because it says, What I Learned from My White Grandchildren, which is an arresting title and would draw you into a different kind of story.
Yes.
So I thought to myself, well, okay, so he did that for a reason through the eyes of your white grandchildren. Now, what I think is interesting from your TED Talk to today, I didn't know the whole story of, for example, from watching the TED Talk, of how you became a white grandfather, which for me as a viewer was really critical to understand everything else you said. So I see that you've added that since 2014, and I want to ask, why did you put in the details of how you became the white grandfather? I know that's obvious too, but I think it's important.
Well, I'm not sure I gave much detail.
You didn't,
but,
yeah, so
right.
I was curious. Yeah, why, because that seemed to be a decision that you made.
Well, it was adding more material, and that's actually the stories that I wanted to tell, the story of that anonymous relative. I wanted to add that story, and in that story, I have to identify my white wife as part of that. Am I getting it?
Yes,
yes.
but I didn't know until today. You
so
know,
23 years ago,
yeah.
I married Laura. She was white then; she's still white today.
Yeah. I'm guessing.
But when I married her, she had four white children, and those children have given us 10 grandchildren, and 9.5 of them are white as well.
Okay. So 9.5. I'm going to go with that. So you have placed an extreme value on the conversation, mostly aiming at a white audience, but really to open up about something that, as you've described, is really dangerous. People feel it's dangerous to talk about. And I'm wondering if, in preparing to do this, did you think to yourself, or I'm just going to ask, it feels like often when we think about having conversations about race, the burden of initiating the conversation is on the folk of color. Sorry for your wife. You know,
right.
So I'll say African American since I'm here. The
Right.
African Americans are people of color, that it must initiate, it must be directed, it must be picked up by the folk of color.
Right.
Which, as someone who's talked about this a lot, I wonder if you'd respond to that.
Well, I would agree with you, and I guess one reason that I wanted to do this talk, even initially, was, again, to make it easier for white folks to identify their own stories and to start telling their own stories. And I hope my stories are both unique enough and universal enough that folks can say, I can relate to that. Everyone has race stories. Everybody, and some of them are not pleasant. But what we tend to do, and Jennifer Harvey makes this point in her book, Raising White Kids, is we tend to, I don't mean we, I mean some white folks, tend to say we're not going to deal with that. We're not even going to say the word black. We're not noticing racial differences. And I wanted to make it easier
for people to engage in that. So to engage in a conversation, you have to have two halves, in the conversation. And what happens now with folk who have been around for a while and are in the workplace, like many of these people here, for persons of color, is that you get to a certain point and you feel like, I'm okay with Tony Peterson teaching, but I'm tired of teaching. I just want to live my life, and I want to have a reasonable discussion about this as it comes up. But why do I have to, every day of my life, teach you about what this is all about? And I really want someone who has put himself out there to be a teacher around this, to address that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're asking great questions, because it's also interesting that those everyday opportunities are exhausting. But when I did this talk originally as a TED Talk, it was to get it out there and to say it's not that hard. And maybe for me personally, maybe cathartically, it was to put those everyday conversations in perspective. Now I'm going to just go whole hog, because I think I have a niche. I think I have a way that could be helpful for people. And yeah, I still have those everyday conversations. But many of my white grandchildren live in my household. So we have these conversations every day. But they're couched in a personal relationship that we already have that is way beyond race. They are very clear that Peepaw is black and nobody else in our family, in our immediate family, or our household is black. But mainly Peepaw is Peepaw. And they can introduce those conversations. And they, all of my grandchildren who are in school are in multicultural environments in school. Damon plays basketball now. He's 13. I'm missing his last game tonight. But we usually transport his teammates from one, if it's an away game, we transport Damon and three of his teammates. One's a white guy, one's a Honduran guy, and one is a African guy. And they talk freely about race because they're of that generation, and because they're in the culture that they're in
what
the school.
What are they saying?
Well, when I say they talk freely, they don't talk seriously and freely. So last time we were driving, one of the boys, we were driving to the game, and we see people, and we see people on the road as we're driving to the game, and they're being silly. They're 13 and 14-year-olds, 12 and 13-year-olds. They're being silly, and they're saying, yelling stuff out to people on the walkway, and then they see someone who actually looks like, ethnically, he could be very related to this African kid. And so one of the white kid, not Damon, said, "Hey, Marty, is that your cousin?" And they laughed. They all laughed because they knew it wasn't just random black guy. It was someone who looked very much like he could be of Martin's family. But they know that that's not a big deal. Again, the relationship covered the difficulty that could be there. So they're more used to talking about those sorts of things than maybe.
So two things to unpack from just that story. One is, in your family, because people are living with you, they're all different races, are you the one always having the race conversation? I'd like to know, what kind of conversation about race are the kids having with your wife, with other of the white grandchildren, with themselves? I'd be interested to know what that conversation is about.
You know, I don't know when I'm not there what those
Just wondering
conversations
if your wife
are.
had reported.
But what
Yeah.
I do know is that my wife is very race conscious. So she would be bringing up those conversations with the kids as well. For the kids, it's only when it matters. Zoe came home from school early in January, and she said, Peepaw, I learned about Martin, Luke, and Chelsea, of course, corrected her and said, it's Martin Luther King. And I said, well, what did you learn about him? And now I'm not remember what she said she learned about him. But she brought that up with me because they're learning it in school. It's, it was right before Martin Luther King Day. And so we had an extended conversation about Martin Luther King and what he actually did, and kids' version, because Martin Luther King is way bigger than the legend, way more complex than the legend.
Yes.
So,
I've done documentary better,
yes,
but let's move
yes.
on. Just to say.
Yes.
So in the car, back to the car just for a moment, with the other kids in the car, what influence can you see directly from your grandchildren with these other kids who are riding in the car? You said the joke was everybody knows, but I'm just curious because in your family you've made it clear that we're relaxed. If it comes up, Peepaw's going to talk about it, Meemaw's going to talk about it, we're going to talk about it.
Right.
And we're going to talk about it in the moment or later.
Right.
And so clearly your grandchildren have a different take on these things and then maybe perhaps their friends do.
What I think has happened as we've been shuttling these boys is it's my car, and they have gotten to know me, and so it's really not channeled through Damon. Mm-hmm. It's really just the little bit of relationship that I have with them, because we always shuttle the same boys. It's always those three boys. And so, I can't remember a specific conversation we've had, but I know that those boys feel comfortable talking about those sorts of things in our space.
And do they ask you questions sometimes?
No, because it's those racial things are not a big deal to them. So there might be, it's really on the not on a very deep level. So no, they're not asking those questions. Maybe if we had a relationship deeper than driving to a ball game, that might be happening.
So one of the things I was struck by on your LinkedIn page, it says people are finally talking openly about race issues. Unfortunately, many of the conversations are unproductive. And so I wanted to question, they are talking about race a lot?
Well,
I'm unaware.
I would say in the past 18 months, people are talking a lot about issues. And like I said, many of those conversations are not productive. We've had Charlottesville, we've had DACA, we've had all these things happen. And so people are talking about race, but people are talking more, expressing more openly their racism.
Okay, so we're on the same page. Because
yes,
when you say talking,
yes.
I don't see that as a conversation.
No, not as, no,
Yeah,
right.
so, okay.
Right. But so when I did this talk as a TED Talk in 2014, that whole thing about race being violent and overt and obsolete, well, Charlottesville gave us a whole lot there because we saw violent and overt and not obsolete. But we also saw something else that and this concerns me, is we saw folks, white folks, who were able to say with Charlottesville, well, that's not me, so I don't have to talk about race. I can denounce what those folks were doing in Charlottesville, and I'm in the clear. And the problem with that, of course, is racism isn't just overt and violent. Racism isn't just individual. In fact, mostly it's not individual. Mostly it's systemic. And it has to do with, I actually don't like the term white privilege because it sets folks off, but I think it's a reality. I think when folks hear the word white privilege, some folks misunderstand it, and then the guard goes up. But there is, Michael Emerson likes to talk about those structures that favor some folks over others. He talks about white transparency, where everyone else is ethnic except white folks. And he talks about white normativity, where the white experience is normal and everyone else is different, a variation on the theme. I think with Charlottesville, we did see that overt racism, but I'm afraid it let some other folks off the hook for having race conversations.
Well, a couple things, because we are at Harvard, so the implicit bias test is here with Mazarun Banaji doing that, so we all know we come to the table with some stuff which is easily shown when you take that test, which is free. If people haven't taken it, go take it and see where you are. That's the first thing. The second thing is that Peggy McIntosh of Wellesley has done seminal work about white privilege, in which she couches it in terms that people can understand. If you have not aware of her, then it's unpacking the
invisible
knapsack, in which she asks very specific everyday questions, which have been updated several times. But for example, can you go into a department store and be assured that you will not be followed? So if you can say yes, then that's a privilege. It's a way to articulate the privileges in real life situations, which I think helps in any discussion that we have with white privilege, because that does sound like a concept that people can't get their minds around, particularly if they're feeling, what do you mean I'm not privileged in that way?
And I appreciate you bringing up Peggy McIntosh. I heard her speak 10 years ago in Nashville, and what kind of struck me with her discussion of white privilege is that she started by talking about male privilege.
Yes.
And that really helped me to identify my male privilege. Yeah, I know there's white privilege out there, but I realize now, I realized then that I also have male privilege.
So let's go back to Charlottesville with people saying to themselves, that's not me, and I could stand up, but you're just pointing out, which I think is true, is that a lot of people maybe didn't want to recognize themselves in some ways. And there is a study that I cannot recall where it's from, which identified that people will do everything not to be called racist. Not to be called racist. Now, their actions can be racist, but just don't call them a racist. So I'd like you to respond to that.
So Michael Emerson has written an article. I'm trying to picture the title, but I can't remember the title. But according to Emerson, every ethnic group has at least one word that is a charged word. It's the N word. There's all these other words for different groups where people have a visceral reaction to that word. And he said, for white folks, the words honky and cracker don't quite fit the bill. They just sound like silly words. He said, I've decided that for white folks, that word is racist. The word racist is the one that gets blood boiling. And I think part of that is because, well, it's an ugly word. We know it's bad. And we reduce racism to, am I a racist or am I not a racist? Was that a racist act or was that not a racist act? And race is so much more complicated than that. I avoid using the word racist as a noun. And I don't even like to use it very much as an adjective, except to describe larger phenomena than was that a racist act or not. The other part of that is intention matters. And so when I say I'm not a racist, I mean, I didn't mean that to be a racist sort of thing. Does that save it from being racist?
No.
Maybe, maybe not.
No. The road to hell, paved with good intentions. Just saying.
Right.
Well, the reason I want to put that on the table because the other part of it, from the black side, and I know that your talk and what you're doing now is really aimed at a white audience. This is really important to understand in these conversations, if we're going to have a two-way street conversations, that folks of color, I'll speak for black folk, will go out of their way to identify anything than to call it racist. Oh, maybe they didn't see me in line. Oh yeah, I guess I should have said whatever, or maybe this
Like
is
my relative.
Yeah, something, because you don't want it to be that. Because for it to be that, it is out of your control. People are responding to you for factors that are beyond your control. It had nothing to do with your behavior.
Right.
Right. It's embedded in the system. It's embedded, and that person is coming at it. So that's something that drives me insane when people say, well, that's all they want to do is call something racist. No, we don't. We'd like not to. I'd like you to just be a rude person.
Right. Right.
You know?
Right.
And I know it's disconnected to that.
Well,
you know?
And what I think some folks don't understand is when we call out racism in a situation or race in a situation as a factor in a situation,
Yeah.
we're not saying it's the only factor. You may be rude and racist.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
There may be all kinds of sorts of things happening in that particular situation. But to say that race is not a factor, you know, my opinion right now is that if I'm interacting with someone who is not African American, race is a factor in that interaction. Now, it can be a positive factor, it can be a negative factor, it could be mixed factors. But race is there. It's there. And so when black folks see race around every corner, it's not necessarily to say it's the only factor. It's to say, but it is a powerful factor. It is a meaningful factor. And to discount it is ignorant at best. But when you raise that question, I mean, that question raises other questions. So how do we get around that? And I don't know all the answers. No. I think storytelling is one way to get around it. That's one reason I did this. I thought I was approaching race from a different standpoint than we tend to, which is, am I racist or not? But you know, when we get to that point, both sides tend to shut down. So if we can get around that somehow, that'd be great.
I can recall an instance of a friend of mine. This was a few years ago when these conversations about race were supposed to be, you know, we have these periods that come in ebb and flows. We're now going to have it.
Right.
And so my friends, lived in Florida, my friend's church, and I always tell this story because I think it's fascinating. They decided we are going to have the conversation about race. He went to a mixed church, and here are the rules. People that sign up, we want everybody to sign up. You may not leave. Oh. It's going to get rough in here. You need the space for people to say what they really want to say. That's not happening in the first, the second, the third, or even maybe the fourth time that we meet. But on the fifth time, when it comes out, you have to come back on the sixth. You must commit to being there. And they hung in there for a year. And I said, well, how was it at the end? He said there was a lot more understanding of people. I can't say we walked together kumbaya, but it was really eye-opening because nobody could leave and everyone was committed. And you will agree that in these everyday situations, we're not trying to be committed to go beyond the painful in having these discussions. Right. That's where the rub comes. So the conversation never engages because it's a fit and a start around, as you well pointed out, an incident or something happening or whatever in the office or something.
Right. And my mission, my unique mission, as I see it today, is really about the scratching of the surface. Okay. I mean, I have plenty of those deeper conversations, but the neat thing that I want to offer is a way to scratch the surface and begin to go deeper. Because if we're really going to change our racialized society, we have to go deeper. But we can't go deeper unless we're scratching the surface. And so that's what I'm doing. I've been in one of those, I was in a workshop also, I guess, about 10 years ago. It was with the United Methodist Church. And they were United Methodist leaders from around the country who gathered for this Embrace, actually it was Abolish Racism seminar, and it was very much as you described. And it did get very heated in that situation. I've taught United Methodist pastors in Tennessee, in Nashville, because they are required to go to a Saturday morning diversity training. And the ones who drag their feet are the white rural pastors who have to come into the big city on a Saturday morning, give away their whole Saturday morning to talk about diversity issues. And they will come in, these pastors, and they will tell you in no uncertain terms, I don't want to be here. I think this is worthless. This is,
I'm not racist.
I'm not racist,
Yeah.
and I'm just here because I can't continue to be a United Methodist pastor unless I come here. And so we work through, it's a 4-hour session, we work through all of that. And inevitably, at the end of the 4 hours, we have people saying, okay, this was not a waste of my time. I'm not where you are, or I'm not where they are, but this was a helpful 4 hours. Now, 4 hours is still only 4 hours.
Right.
But if we can commit to that, and in this case, it was sort of coerced, you have to be there.
Right.
But if we can commit to that, then yes, we can move somewhere.
So you mentioned all the words that are becoming highly charged or have always been highly charged. One today that I think has become that is identity. And let's put it together with identity politics. Now, all of a sudden, because I'm an African American person and may have certain focuses and issues that don't concern you but are important to me, that's somehow racist and narrow-minded.
Right.
But when white people were doing it, it was just fine. Don't let other groups have a focus and have that be identity-focused in some way. I mean, that's the shorthand way of saying it. So I want to put that together with, let me circle back to something you said in your talk, which I will be honest to say, let me think about that. And that's with Elsa and the identity, okay? So you said, your daughter said it's black, it's ugly, and you had to agree that that's not what she looked like. I raised this is going to sound crazy, but let me just put all my stuff out here. So many of us who are not in the majority have worked hard to make sure there are representations of ourselves everywhere because we know we exist in those spaces, or sometimes we just need that reflected back. I have a huge Black Santa collection, and I'll be damned if Megyn Kelly or anybody else tells me Santa not black.
Right.
All right?
Right.
So I had a little issue with you saying, Elsa, I agree, so I want you to unpack that for me.
Well, here's how I unpack it. Elsa is not Santa.
Okay.
And I'm so glad you asked this question because I have this theory about Disney princesses, okay? My theory about Disney princesses is the first ones were all white, and it didn't matter that they were white. They were just white. And then Disney decided, let's have a Pocahontas. Let's have a Mulan. Let's have a
Tiana.
I'm getting to Tiana.
Okay.
So this is my theory about Disney princesses. I think Elsa and Anna were the first really white Disney princesses. So they're not generic white. They're not generic white princesses. They were I mean, their names are Scandinavian. This setting has to be cold place, has to be, I think it's supposed to be Denmark. I don't remember exactly. It's never in the story. But so when I use Elsa, I see them as very white characters. But Disney has pushed this with Tiana. Now, the original Princess and the Frog story was a Grimm story.
Right.
But what they did is they totally transformed the story and set it in New Orleans and set it with black folks who were ethnically black. They're not just dark skinned. Everything they do is set in that setting, just as Elsa and Anna are set in that other setting. And Disney has figured out, because they're so altruistic.
Yes, they are.
Disney has figured out that you can deal with these universal issues and have specific identities to the characters, like in most great literature. My favorite is the latest that I've seen anyway, which is Moana. And all 5 of my granddaughters, and there are 4.5 of them are white, all 5 of them love Moana. And that story of Moana would not fit outside of Polynesia. It would be a completely different story if Moana wasn't a Polynesian girl. But my girls identify with Moana and recognize that Moana is ethnically different from them. So the specificity in the ethnicity is important. And I don't think it would have mattered with Snow White, which ironically,
Yeah, well,
you know.
Yeah, I'll give her that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're cool on Snow White.
But I think for Disney, Elsa and Anna are ethnically white folks. So that's why it fits for me. Plus, I give Chelsea a pass because 5- and 6-year-old kids are just looking at what's right. What is the right Elsa? What is the right Tiana? What is this person supposed to look like? If we had a Black Elsa story, it would probably be a different story.
Well, would then she recognize that that's what she's supposed to look like? I mean,
I
on
don't
the
know.
other side? That's why I'm...
I don't know. I think, she's 10 now, so,
Yeah.
so we'd have a deeper conversation about that now. But at 6 years old, I mean, it's just like you're just learning your colors. You're just learning to identify this is that and this is not that. And Elsa, I've watched this movie. This is not right. This is not this is not how the movie goes. Even if they had changed her name and not her color, same thing. It would be, that's not the right character.
This is why you're a teacher and I have no children, because I would have gone a whole different way in that moment, let me just say.
Well, it's really in that moment, it's because I'm a grandparent and because I've known Chelsea all her life, and she's sitting right there and she feels comfortable enough to say those words
Which is your
to
point.
me,
Yes.
not realizing that people are gonna see her as a racist. I will tell you this. When the TED Talk aired, was available online a few weeks after I actually gave the talk, we had a family viewing. And Chelsea was 7 by then. And she was sitting on the floor, and I was sitting in a chair behind her. And when we got to that point, and she saw people's reactions, you could see her kind of curl up in a ball. Because she picked up that she must have done something wrong. And so I just got down on the floor and I hugged her and I said to her, "You didn't do anything wrong." And I tried to explain to her at 7 what was there, and also what was going on there and how people reacted. But I told that story precisely to say, it sounds racist, but it's not. Or she didn't intend it to be. She wasn't saying black skin is ugly. She was saying this particular picture is ugly and it's not Elsa. But I will tell you, as people have viewed this talk, they have, that's the story that most people want to talk about. It's the most difficult one to talk about. And when I was preparing the TED Talk, I was practically finished with the talk before I brought that story out. So I added a little bit more here to sort of flesh it out a little bit.
Which led me to pretty much, I'm coming to my end of my time before you guys get to talk, which is that what pieces of your talk, or what's been the biggest resonance to audiences that you've either heard back through the online TED audience or when you present in other places? I'm curious about what always stands out, and has that changed over time? Because that was 2014.
That was 2014.
And there are many circumstances that have changed, including who we have in the White House, whose take on race is right where we need to be in terms of conversation or something.
Right.
You know?
Well, that story of all the stories is the one that resonates with people and mostly is uncomfortable for people. Some people just like the line where I say race is not real, but it does matter. That line alone shakes people up a little bit. You know, the problem with that sort of slogan is race is, as Andrea said, race is a very complicated word. And I, you know, I had 18 plus minutes to do that talk, and so we can't unpack everything related to race. But that story and that slogan, I think, are the things that people kind of latch on to. And then people like to tell their stories. You know, on YouTube, where people most watch this video, I do read the comments. You know.
I'm scared for you. What are they? Yeah, I deliberately did not read the comments. So.
I do read the comments, but I do because I want to hear those people like to say, thank you for this, here's my story. And I love that. The opportunity people feel like they have to start talking to their children about race. Some people have said, I'm able to do that a little bit now. I know where to start.
So now you've already said, but I have to ask anyway, in a conclusion fashion, is you're not here with the answers about this. You know, you're here to lay something on the table, get people at least stimulated toward thinking about it. But that aside, what solutions do you, some practical solutions for everyday folk who are going to listen to this and say, okay, I can have a conversation in my family about it and with some, but if I want to go beyond that, which is after all what you hope the conversation will be across racial lines, then how should I proceed?
One place is to, I would say, is to get in touch with your own story. There's a documentary that's making the film festival circuit called The Long Shadow. And it's being done by Frances Cossey, who is a white woman from Mississippi. And she is a filmmaker herself, but this is her story. And the story she's telling is of her heritage as a white person. And she actually directs it and also narrates this story. And it travels some of the same ground as 13th, if you've seen that movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
and Ava DuVernay.
Right. Mm-hmm. So she goes back historically, but it's a personal and social history. And what happened with her is, as an adult, I don't know where the impetus came from, but she wanted to know more about race and her family, and she knows that she has a great-great-great-grandfather or some number of greats, grandfather who was a high-ranking Confederate officer who was actually very active in the work that he was doing. And so she went to, I think, Virginia to learn more about that story. But what she comes across is saying, basically is saying, this is my racist history. And I don't want, I can't erase that, but I want to tell this story because this is my story and it might be helpful to other folks. And so I think for any of us, and especially white folks who have not done this before, it might even mean just writing down your story of race. Why is it difficult for you to talk about these issues? Why do you not want to talk about these issues if it's difficult for you and if you don't want to talk about it? And start thinking through those things. Michael Emerson, again, he should be paying me. Michael Emerson teaches sociology, and he does a experiment with his students, which I've used in churches as well. And so he says to his students, for the next week, I want you to, whenever you talk about folks, especially white folks, say, my white wife, my white friend, my white children. Always refer to them as in their whiteness. And he says, and then I want you to write a 5-page paper about that experience. And he said, now I know this is an extremely difficult and uncomfortable thing for some of you to do. So if you choose not to do it, then you need to write a paper about why you chose not to do it. And so he does this on a regular basis with his class, multiracial classes. The week is up, they come in to turn in their papers, and they have a discussion. And he says, how many of you did this assignment? And guess what?
What?
All the people of color did this assignment. How many people found this difficult to do? It was only the white folks who found it difficult to do. Because white folks have not been, mostly have not been trained to identify their own ethnicity. It's gray. So, I mean, that's a practical thing that folks could do.
That is.
It's just to take a week and do that, and then reflect on it.
All right. Well, now, that's the end of our time, but your time is open. Now, I like questions, no statements, and wait for the microphone.
Good morning. I want
morning.
to thank you, Tony, for inviting me as a diversity inclusion educator myself. So I love this Embrace Race. I have a question, and I actually have a solution.
Okay.
My question is this. Albert Einstein has a great quote that says, if you want to solve a problem, it says, you cannot solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. You must stand on a higher ground. So I would like your thought about that question. Do we have to focus on our consciousness? Then in terms of a solution, I invite all of us to check out World Unit Inc. because we have a song that can help all of us embrace diversity. The song was performed at the United Nations by children. So if you go to worldunitinc.org and the Facebook page, you will see 429 children singing this amazing song, and they're even doing it in sign language. So again, I would like your thoughts about this quote by Einstein.
Well, too, thank you for your question. Certainly, I believe we need to bring ourselves to a higher consciousness. And I do what I do, hoping to have some avenues to do that for folks. Because the ways we typically talk about race issues and other issues are you for or against? And so I do think storytelling is a way to get at those issues with a higher level of consciousness.
Thank you.
Next. Up here in the front.
Hi, my name is Tina. I'd love to know what that song was that was just referred to. There are a lot of references to things I was trying to write down. I didn't catch them all, but I've learned in the diversity dialogues here about hidden bias and about the problem with color blindness, which has helped me to understand things that I didn't know, to learn things I didn't know before. And you mentioned a couple terms. I think it was something about transparency and normalcy. Could you say what those terms were again?
So white transparency is the idea that that everyone is ethnic except white folks. White normalcy is the idea that everything white is the standard,
Right.
and everyone else is a variation on that.
So
Which explains why in news reports, a
Right.
man robbed a bank,
Right, or
unless
a
it's a
black
black
man.
man.
Right.
Or an Asian man.
Right.
Okay.
Similarly, I heard information about the way language is used and how some languages that use gender pronouns and some that don't completely bias us in terms of how we view what sexuality, people's gender. So my question is that I didn't know what I didn't know until I started coming to these diversity dialogues and hearing stories from people who had experiences different than mine. I didn't even know there was something to even know about.
Right.
So that's been very, very eye-opening for me, and I've now tried to really expose myself and find out more about other people's experiences, definitely along issues of race, because I know there's a lot I don't know and to learn, but other things too, religion and such, and gender, and the many things that make us different but bring so much to the table. My question, and you were just sort of beginning to address this, is I want to have those conversations, and it's how to have them, and some examples were just given, but it's tripping over the language even, and I've asked people of color what they want to be called. Do you want somebody with darker skin? Do you want to be called African American? And some people are like, yes. Some people say black. Some people are like, I'm Indian American. So many different things. So how to have that conversation? Like, I want to initiate it. I have a grandchild. I want to get over this colorblindness thing. I want to talk about race. I want to identify it. But I want to move this forward in a positive way and trying to understand how to do that with my grandchildren, but also with people who are different from me, and how to do it in a way that's not going to come across as, here's that token conversation.
All right. I want you to have time to answer.
Oh, okay. Lost my train of thought. One word of direction I would give is recognize that you're not going to. These are difficult conversations. Partly because of the things you just described. I don't even know what this person wants to be called. And so that's why we don't have the conversations, because they're difficult, because we don't know that. And it's just being courageous enough to enter into it. Maybe to ask that question, what do you want to be called? You'll notice that almost exclusively in my talk, I use black and white. It's really because it's easy for what I'm talking about here. I refer to myself as African American sometimes, black sometimes, probably black more than anything because it's my generation. But I think what you're talking about is some of the factors that keep us from entering into these conversations. Recognize that you're not going to say everything right, and recognize that you really, if you're serious about this, you're going to do more listening than talking anyway. So that's what I would say.
Here's a hand over here.
Hi, thank you. So you just said in your talk you specifically used the terms black and white, but what had struck me when you were talking about driving your grandson's basketball team is the 3 kids were white, Honduran and African. So you have
Right.
a race, a color, you have a country, and you have a whole continent.
Right.
And I'm curious if that was deliberate or why that was chosen, or the larger question is, how do we talk about people? And these words are so important, and that it struck me because it really did stick out as just three different, very different ways to describe these boys that are on the same team.
You're right. You caught me. I mean, yeah. The white boys were white Americans. The Honduran boy is, I was trying to be specific because I just learned that he was Honduran. And the African guy, I'm only guessing that he's African. And so I was distinguishing him from African American, but I don't really know where he's from. I suspect it's East Africa, but I don't know. I just know what he looks like. And so, you know, I was not very clean with those distinctions.
And are they all American, just to follow up? So are they,
As far as I
Honduran
know,
American?
they're all American. I don't know if any of them were born outside of the country. I don't know.
I just think it's,
Yeah.
our president recently was in a meeting with a high-level a Japanese woman, a Korean woman, I'm sorry, and he saw her while there was some conversation going on in the room and said, "Who's the pretty Asian lady?" And she was described as a high-level defense, security, whatever she was, or is, and he said, "Oh, maybe we can get her, but she doesn't do what he thought she did, and maybe we can get her to do something that had nothing to do with her life or work, because she was the pretty Asian woman." So just, and not understanding that she was Asian American, just saying.
But but your question and your perception and your
Yes.
question demonstrates why we won't. It demonstrates what Tina was talking about. Why we don't want to have these. What if I say the wrong thing? Well, I clearly said the wrong thing. Partly because I don't have enough information about these boys to know exactly where they're from. But yeah, I used skin color. I used a continent. I used a country. You're right. Yeah.
Over here. Up here in the, oh, okay, I meant in the front, but that's fine, okay.
Hi, I'm hiding in the back. So I got your back. Merida is the first white Disney princess.
Okay.
From Brave.
Okay.
Ethnically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually had a question about whiteness. First of all, thank you for roping in, everyone into the conversation, because I know it can be really hard to, address issues of race across racial identities. So thank you for that. But I have a question about the development of whiteness over time, because so far we've only talked about it as a monolithic identity that has never changed. But depending on when you look at Merida, right, she's a Scottish woman, so she wasn't always white. How do you talk about the changes in the definition and the mutability of whiteness and how it fits into the greater context of race?
I think that's where we want to go. Part of my, what I think is my mission right now is to expose whiteness. And when I say expose, I don't mean for all its evils. I mean, one book says making whiteness visible. The questions I'm asking, I said, are only scratching the surface. I say over and over in this talk, let's talk to our kids about race, tell them why there's black and white. And I don't say anything about why there's black and white in this talk. The why is the real conversation. And I think that's what you're getting at. It's a historical why. Irish folks were not always white. Italian folks were not always white. Sometimes are, sometimes aren't. Scottish folks were not always white. So where did whiteness come from? That's the big question. But in what I'm doing right now, I can't start with that question. I have to start with something, in these sorts of situations, I have to start with something that will open folks up, because I want to get to that question, where did whiteness come from? And that's a bigger question than where did blackness come from, even though they came from the same place, you know. But the real question is, where did whiteness come from?
And probably somebody in this room can tell me the scholar who wrote How the Irish Became White, which is pretty
What is his-
well-known
Yeah.
book and very instructive
Yeah.
along those lines. Over here.
Hello. You started off saying that your intended audience was white people. And so I wondered how your conversations would change if it was a white grandparent or white parent with a black child or black grandchild.
Well, there's a gentleman who saw this TED Talk and contacted me because he had just adopted brothers. So you got me. One is, they're both biracial. One is Hispanic and white. I don't know what his Hispanic side comes from. The other is African American and white. So the man is white. Good question. The man is white, and he's adopted these two brothers, half-brothers, who are each half white. But it's mainly the 3-year-old, the African American son, who he contacted me about, because he said to me, Caden is teaching me so much about things I've never thought of before. He's 3 years old. And so what's happened is not that I'm dictating to Sam what he should do, but Sam wants to ask me some questions because of what Caden is saying to him. And Caden is very aware that he's the only African American in his family, and mostly in the world around him. But he said his dad said to, Sam said he said to Caden one day, around some racial issue, he said, I'm sorry, Caden, I just don't, I don't really know how to answer that question. And Caden said, that's okay, Daddy, I'll teach you. So it would be, you know, I threw this talk out there. I didn't say only white people watch it. But I think the message for the segment of white folks that I envisioned is different from the rest of society, only because the rest of us have some place to grip to start those conversations. But to go deeper in those conversations, this question about where whiteness came from, where blackness came from, especially those ethnicities, I think those are questions for all of us. I think that's something for all of us to explore. Yeah.
I would add this. There's a brand new book. I cannot pronounce the author's name. I'm so sorry. So it's called So You Want to Talk About Race. I heard her interviewed on The Takeaway yesterday, and she referred to her mom as saying she raised black kids, but she did not know how to be black, which is the distinction that she made. But she had great, obviously, love and fondness for her mom. But anyway, here's a new book. It's all about talking about race. People are interested. Over here.
Hi, my name's Chris. Thank you very much for being here and for this discussion. My husband's West African, and we have 2 children together. When my son was maybe 3 or 4, he wanted to play good guys, bad guys, and he said, you know, Daddy, you be the bad guy. And I questioned him on that, and he said it was because he was black. And I just want to challenge a little bit the Elsa thing, because I also have a friend who's black, and her husband is black, and she experienced something similar with her son. And so I think even though things are changing and getting better, even at such a young age where our kids didn't watch that much TV, they were influenced by the media and things around them, and it's an opportunity to press a little more and have those conversations. For me, my question is, in a practical way in this work setting, how to address some of the issues that come up. For example, we mentor year up students, so something that I've heard along the way, some of these kids, I would say, speak a different dialect of English, if you want to put it that way. And we're mentoring them and we're coaching them to be in the workplace. And so I've heard them be advised, or in a loving, trying to coaching way, to change the way that they talk. And I just would like you to address that, please.
I don't have an answer. I actually have taught mostly adult students. I teach Bible, I teach ethics at Trevecca Nazarene University. And because these are adult students, they're folks who, for the most part, have it's undergraduate, it's degree completion. They're folks who have been out of school for a long time and are coming back to complete a degree. Most of them have been either at home or working in not executive level jobs. And I have to grade their papers. And part of my background is in editing. And I'm reading these papers, and they write like they talk, and it is not on a even bare minimum scholarly level. So I've really just begun my EDD program. So one of my dissertation topics that I'm considering is helping those folks who don't write with standard English to learn to write with standard English. But it's only about in this case, it's only about their writing, because the folks I'm talking about are from a variety of ethnicities, mainly rural or urban. And so it's the same phenomenon, even though culturally they're coming from different places. And so I'm able to address those issues as an instructor grading papers in a way that has nothing to do with their ethnicity. It has everything to do with what is considered scholarly writing. A theory I have is that if you learn to write, then you learn to talk at the level that is acceptable in the profession you want to be in. But I'm well aware that these are all sticky issues, because are we saying suppress your upbringing, suppress your language that is fully communicable, but in professions that have decided this is the kind of language you have to have. So I don't have any real answers, other than I recognize that's a significant issue, and maybe there's little pieces, like the writing piece, where we can say that this is acceptable scholarly writing and this is not.
I also think that it may be interesting for your students or your mentees to understand that pretty much all of us who have ascended to certain places in corporate America certainly speak two languages, flat out.
Right.
And I know when to speak the other one
Right.
and when not.
Right.
And so it's bilingual. And
Yeah.
so that's just an understanding that they have to know. And over here in this setting, this is one way. Over here in this setting, it's another way. Because you're just not going to take that part of me, that Black Santa part away from me. You're just not going to. And this is how I preserve it.
I think about the former president, President Obama.
Exactly.
And if you watch his speeches and you see him speaking in predominantly black settings, he talks differently. And I don't think it's intentional. I think it's natural. It's automatic. In fact, he's from Hawaii. I'm from Hawaii. We went to high school together.
Oh, no brag. Go ahead.
But when I go back to Hawaii, I mean, it's been years now, but when I go back to Hawaii and people are talking pidgin English, I automatically start talking pidgin English. It's just natural. And he's the great example of how that just happens naturally in his setting. He's not putting on anything. It just happens automatically for him.
Same thing for me when I go south.
Yes.
Because, Miss Betty, how you doing? Fine, and you?
Well, that's helpful
Absolutely,
to
that's
me
my
that
conversation.
you say
Yeah.
2 languages, because when
Yeah.
I hear things like that, you know, that's just helpful for me, because I want to be able to validate the kids and not have them
Right.
feel like somebody's trying to change them, and that's not going to be addressed at all.
Well, that's why I think that it's important to have somebody that looks like them to say that, to understand that there is another world. Just a little story about President Obama from a friend of mine. When in his first term, I'm sure he did it more than this, policymaker was working with him about some economic thing and texted him and said, what do you think about, I think so-and-so and so-and-so, and his answer was, they were both black, he was black, of course you know, and the other person was too, and he wrote back, true dat. And she was like, oh my God, this is the president, true dat. She saved it.
We have time for one more question.
Over
There's a
here.
hand up in the front.
Oh, there's
Oh,
one in the
there's a
back.
hand. Two more questions. There's one in the hand in the
Yes.
front.
Thank you for bringing up this discussion. I agree with you that people don't want to be racist, but how they behave today is very hard to get rid of that influence. So suppose if we have magic, that the racist problem is solved with a blink of eye, how would you describe the society, and how would you describe a person who isn't racist, and how would he behave in that society? Thank you.
Very good question. I kind of hint at this towards the end of that talk. The vision I have is a place where race is not erased, but race is embraced. I know that. It's where your ethnicity matters, and only as a gift to the rest of us. I lived in Hawaii for 7 years, graduated from high school there. You know, folks in Hawaii don't have everything right, but they've had to deal with multiple races and multiple cultures, multiple ethnicities in one place for a long time. And the thing about Hawaii is everybody is proud of who they are. Whether they're one ethnicity as we define them, or a mix of a bunch of them as we define them. The whole idea is, I'm proud of me, and I love you for who you are. And it's not that your ethnicity doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. It absolutely matters in how we interact with each other and how you are as a person. So for me, that magical place would be more of that. Now, are there racial tensions in Hawaii? Of course. So in that magical place, there wouldn't be racial tensions. There would only be racial harmony. We're never going to get there, but we can get closer to there.
Up here, last one.
Thank you for being here. My name's Katie. I really appreciate you for sharing your personal story and for encouraging us to do the same. And it strikes me, because we are at a school, where do you think this technique or this approach of sharing personal stories ought to be built into elementary school curriculum or high school curriculum, or even here within higher education?
I think a lot of elementary schools are and I'm speaking for my area in Nashville. Damon, Chelsea, Zoe, Elliot, and Autumn all go to multi-ethnic schools. Elliot and Autumn go to a charter school where they are very explicit about different ethnicities, who's there, what we can learn from one another, that sort of thing. The other three go to schools where it's not explicitly, that I know of, addressed, but they, Chelsea and Zoe go to a school that is 80% Mexican. And they're two little blonde white girls. So there's a lot of Spanish immersion, Hispanic immersion there for them. So those issues get addressed ethnically in that situation, just to have the school run. George Yancey has a book called Neither Jew Nor Gentile, and Yancey's a sociologist who deals with some of these issues. But he studied Protestant universities, so Christian universities, non-Catholic Christian universities, and he wanted to know what are the best practices to help develop inclusion and diversity on your campus. And he came up with 3 things. One, semi-effective, and that is having forums or something on campus to help address diversity, inclusion, equity issues. But he said the other 2 that are more powerful is to have actual courses where folks have to address issues of diversity, and specifically racial diversity, and maybe make those required. Because what they found with those courses is that everyone benefits, but the greatest benefit is for white folks. And they report how great a benefit it is for them, because they had never thought about these things before, they never had to. And then the other thing, and you alluded to this, is to hire people of color. And he's very specific about, in hiring those people of color as faculty and staff, even they, and this will be controversial, they have to be the right folks. Because if they're coming and they're teaching these courses and they're sort of antagonistic or belligerent, then that's not going to help the situation. So they have to be people willing to facilitate a peaceful but maybe contentious situation. So those, does that help?
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony Peterson.
Hi, folks. I'm Chris Ciotti, Associate Dean for FASHR, and I was just actually going to give my thanks for Anthony for sharing his story with us today, and for Callie and Anthony for really engaging in one of the most candid and I think explorative about hard things kind of conversations that we've had in one of these dialogues. So I think that's worth another round of applause. Thank you very much. So this is our second dialogue for this series on storytelling. And I think it's really useful for purposes of exploring hard things to be able to first start by sharing stories. So appreciate everybody coming, appreciate the stories. What we want to do in these forums is provide a safe place to talk about hard things, and then to encourage you and to give you some practical information so you can take that forward into your own work groups and do the same thing. As they said, we don't have all the answers, and these are hard, uncomfortable conversations to have. But I think we all agree that we are in the kind of community and environment where we think it's important to have those, especially in the world today. Let's see, what else do I want to say? I want to always thank Dean Smith, Leslie Kerwin, for enabling me to stand up here today and have these conversations. The leadership, the support, and the funding they give us makes this possible every dialogue all the time. And I also want to thank Andrea Kelton-Harris, who has the passion and the heart and the spine to make these conversations happen, along with Annie McGough over there in the background. So thank you, my dynamic duo, for making this one work today as well.
Please give me the opportunity to do this. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Dilly dilly!
That was unplanned. And we wish there had been a different outcome in any event. Thanks also to the FASHR Diversity Committee. As a team, we do a lot of work in this area, and I'm gratified all the time by there. And then to my colleagues from FASHR who showed up today to make everything work, thank you very much. So for next time, our next dialogue in this year's series on storytelling is on April 19th. Mark your calendars, and we're featuring Mike Robbins, who is an author and has expertise in teamwork and leadership and emotional intelligence, something all of us can benefit from. And he's going to share with us how important it is to bring who you are authentically to work every day. Not easy, but very important. He's going to give us some thoughts on that. I also want to talk about the rally effort. So bear with me here. If you register for each dialogue during the year, there are 3. If you attend each one, you listen and you learn during the year-long series, you're going to be entered into a drawing for a prize. So it's the 3rd time we've done this, folks. We've given away an iPad. Do we have the iPad winner here? All right, yes, stand up.
Whoa.
Thank you. Just trying again.
Wow.
Trying it at 3P. And we've also given away a smartwatch.
Wow.
Smartwatch winner here? Okay, all right, well. And so we're going to do the Rally Challenge again this year. So if you've, this is your 2nd one, come to the 3rd one, and you're going to get entered into the drawing. We're also going to give away 2 copies of each book on our recommended reading list, which is on your programs, which we offer based on some feedback that we got. We listen to your feedback all the time, so please take a moment to fill out those evaluations. We review it as part of our efforts on our diversity dialogue team, and we shape these dialogues based on that. So we're going to give away 2 copies of each book on the recommended reading list randomly. Names have been chosen. They're going to be listed on a bulletin board at the registration desk. So stop by on your way out and see if you've won a book. Wow. And always, we know there's a lot of places you can be and a lot of things you can be doing today. Everybody's very busy, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come down and be with us today. There you go. Tuesday, March 13th at 9 o'clock, online registration for the next dialogue. Thank you again to Anthony Peterson, Kelly Crossley. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.